Hi, everybody. This is Laura Hendrickson. I have Michael Brenner here, and he is a marketing content expert. Thank you so much for being here, Michael. I am so excited because just
Yeah,
looking at some of the things that you've accomplished and the speaking engagements, the books, all this great stuff. I'm sure we'll go over all of it today, but just welcome to this summit and thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about your journey in kind of getting here and maybe one highlight that you feel was one of the key moments when you knew that you knew how to convert and you just got really excited about like, okay, yeah, I got this. And content marketing seemed to be the key for you.
yeah, sure. So, let's see, I started my career in sales. So I worked for the Nielsen company in the research industry, and what we were selling, it was on the retail side, not the media side, so not TV ratings, but basically Nielsen tells retailers what sells in their stores and helps manufacturers figure out the four P's of marketing. And it was what I learned just early on in my career is that I never thought I'd be in sales, but the harder I tried to push the stuff we were selling, the less I was able to convert it. And the more that I just treated the folks that I was calling on as, real people and tried to understand their problems and position solutions that might make sense, but never try to push something that didn't, I was pretty successful and ended up being, I think, the number two salesperson before I left. But I was frustrated with the amount of support we were getting from marketing. So I actually moved into marketing and then spent, 20 years in a marketing career, always with a bias towards marketing that should deliver results, whether it's sales or, retention or new leads or whatever, measurable results. And so I was in a startup where I always love to say I learned how to do marketing without a budget. Went back to a big company. I worked at SAP as their first head of digital and content marketing, and then went out on my own back in 2015. So when I was at SAP, and even before that, I worked for startups. And like I said, the way to do marketing without a budget is really just to tell stories. And so I learned early on, before we even used the term content marketing, that corporate websites typically try to position what companies sell, but no one really engages with that until the very last moment before they're ready to buy. People do engage with content that's helpful and thought leadership and all the kinds of things that some companies get and some companies don't. And so, I learned that early on as a startup CMO. I learned that at SAP, where I was asked to build thought leadership and content marketing without much of a budget, and learn to tap into different experts and professionals around the company. Learned the art of personal branding. Social media was kind of really kicking in for companies, and just one example, learned that ads on social media never work, at least not for many. But helpful content is what really engages people and connects with people and gets retweets and likes and comments. So I just kind of learned that lesson all the way through my career, that being helpful, focusing on customers is a better way to sell if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think what would be really interesting in that sense is that a lot of times people do have that broad stroke of storytelling or content that engages. And getting down into the nitty gritty of it, when you are looking to, niche down, you have your target market, you know a little bit about them, some of their problems, their pains, that sort of thing. Well, have you come up with any kind of formula or, there's some people that have said, oh yeah, there is a formula. There's, your headline, your story, your call to action, that sort of thing. But just what kind of content gets the most engagement and where do you start? Good content that is going to like spark an interest or something.
I actually wrote a book called The Content Formula, so I won't go into it. I'm not trying to push it too much, but what we found when I was at SAP is there's this constant battle between folks who have an editorial mindset that want to create content for customers and the business, which wants to create promotional content. And I usually use a Venn diagram in my keynotes to try to highlight that. Executives want to say, look how great we are. And that content doesn't resonate. Customers are interested in pictures of babies and kittens and puppies and, the Tiger King. And memes and lists and other things like that. And so there's this constant battle that takes place inside companies every single day between, do we do what the executives want or do we do what the customers want? And so it's a pretty simple formula. And in the book, The Content Formula, I talk about the need to define and get buy-in from executives on the business case. The business case for creating engaging content is to reach, engage, convert, and retain buyers you would have never reached. The formula for getting there is very simple. You reach them by looking at the keywords they use. You engage them by looking at the content they're already consuming that isn't created by you. And it's often surprising, like list posts is a great example. The most popular piece of content ever is actually a Huffington Post article that's take a quiz on which Disney princess are you. And
Mhm.
so millions and millions of people took the quiz, men and women, and then shared on Facebook, hey, I'm, Cinderella, and go take the quiz. And the reason those things work is because they're fun and they're engaging and they're shareable and they're very simple. And so one of the most viral pieces of content, I hate that word, but one of the most popular pieces of content we created at SAP was just a list of influencers on one of the topics that were important to our salespeople. It was just a list. Hey, here's 50 people to follow on Twitter for big data. And so but we had executives who were like, no, we want you to talk about HANA, which is the SAP product, but nobody cares about that. So but people do want to understand the influencers and the trends, and they want to know the list of conferences that they should attend if we ever get back to attending conferences. So those are the kinds of struggles that I have every single day with clients. We create plans that map to customer interests. Our clients and many businesses want to create plans that map to their business interests, and what my challenge is always trying to show them that if you do what your customer wants, you will help your company in a greater way.
Sure. Do you often ask questions to the audience? Like if you have if you've grown your Facebook page or your group, are you asking questions? Are you more
Mm-hmm.
often doing quizzes? Like how do you match that engagement side, or say there's a story about a cute kitten that happens to
Mm-hmm.
be, watching you
Relevant.
on your computer or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Happens to be an Apple computer. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I mean, there's a number of different tools that we use, and one is like you said, just asking your customers. I mean, you could do a survey, you could do a poll, whatever works. You can ask your sales team, what are the most frequently asked questions you get. That's one of my favorites. I used to love to tell everybody when I worked at SAP, the executives who didn't want to write for us, I would send them emails and ask them 3 or 4 questions. And first it was usually like, hey, you've been identified as an executive who's an expert in whatever. Would you write for us? And they would say, no, I don't have time. Then I would send them an email and say, okay, well, here's just 3 or 4 questions on your topic. They would answer them in paragraphs. And
Mhm.
then I would reply and say, guess what? You just wrote a blog post. Like, every email almost that, executives and companies reply to is a blog post in a way.
Yeah.
Those are some growth hacker kind of tools that you can use. But there's also things like Answer the Public. If you want to share the link with your audience, answerthepublic.com, completely free. Type in a keyword, like for me it might be content marketing, and it shows you all the who, what, when, where, why, how questions that people ask when they go into Google. Very simple tool. I like BuzzSumo, BuzzSumo.com. I think you get 20 searches for free per month. I'm a paying license holder, but type any topic or website into that tool and it'll tell you all the most shared content on that topic or from that website. So it's a great way to see what's engaging with people. It's a great way to do competitive intelligence analysis. Those are just 2 simple tools. Another fun one is Google autofill. Like if you type in, I have a client who creates radiology equipment, and they target radiologists, and they want to spend all day talking about their equipment. But if you type radiologists and then hit the space bar in Google, it shows you what radiologists actually search for when they go to Google. And guess what the number one thing radiologists want to know about? How much money they should be making. The first thing you do if you type radiologist space is radiologist salary, because radiologists are searching for how much money should I be making. Or radiologist training and education. They want to know, have they missed on one of their continuing education requirements?
Mm.
So we created a radiologist salary guide for that client. Those are the kinds of things that they make sense when I explain them, but the executives inside those companies would have never come up with that idea because they're focused too much on, my machine is awesome and we want radiologists to know about it. Well, radiologists don't care so much about your machine. They want to make sure that they're making enough money.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between making things look good but ultimately it has to function. And like you said, you
Mm-hmm.
get back to that ROI of what are you spending and how is that really affecting the bottom line? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
really a lot of times the clients will come to you and say, well, we want more customers, but they
Mhm.
don't really understand that the entirety of marketing, to know that there are inside factors within that conversions. And that's one of the focuses of the summit, is really understanding how to convert online. And I
Mhm.
think creating that engaging content, being able to kind of break it up into the social media postings and things like this, and then having it on your website. If you did have a structure to great content, what would you say that would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the structure, like I said, it really flows out of the keyword research. And while SEO is a topic that some people think is like for agencies, and some people think it's for people in white coats to do, and some people think that it's like a black magic. It's really just about figuring out, like, when I get new clients, I just ask them, if you could imagine in your head ranking number one for 5 or 10 search terms, what would they be?
Mhm.
And then from that list, I can generate 100, 200 related keywords that are really, really relevant to attract the right audience for that client. Then we take that same list of keywords and we scrape the web with the tools I mentioned and others to try to generate a list of, and we kind of reverse engineer a list of content that we think would resonate with their audience. But there are a couple of interesting, so you mentioned structure. So for example, I always tell clients that the newspaper, even though we don't all read printed newspapers anymore, but they do print newspapers still.
Yeah.
And Monday morning, the newspaper still prints a business section, even though there was no stock market happening on Saturday and Sunday.
Mhm.
Like, newspapers print a local news, a business, a sports, whatever the sections might be for your daily local newspaper. They print those sections every day, and that's what I try to get through to clients, is that you need to identify 4 or 5 key themes that are important to your. It's kind of like the conversation thread of your business, and you need to publish on a regular basis against those key themes or pillars. If the content is based on keyword research, if it's mapped up against the content that engages up through those 4 pillars or 5 pillars or whatever the themes may be, those brands win every time. They attract new customers, they rank for keywords. Then the question becomes, okay, how do we start to convert those?
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of a big question you're trying to answer. And the answer, it's the same. It's, if we look at the buyer journey for almost any industry, people start with, what is this thing and why does it matter? And then they want to understand, well, how do I implement it at my business? And then they ask, well, are there companies like mine that have done this, and what did they find? Where can I find out more? How much does it cost? The companies that convert the best on their websites and in the marketing that they do, they map their content programs to each one of those questions so that they answer, what is their solution? Why is it better than any other? How do you use that solution to solve a problem? Where and how much is it going to cost? And the right conversion pathing, if you will, or customer journey content will generate higher returns and higher conversions than any other approach.
Yeah, and even as you're walking through that, it'd be fun to go back, of course, and look at the recording, but to slow that down to say, okay, each little piece, and do you have that as the lead and the journey? And even with some of the other people I've spoken to who did start in sales, and they're talking about how their sales process in person can often be reflected on a sales page or a landing page of sorts. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a fun way to look at things. And I've really enjoyed absorbing all this information, of course.
Good. That's great.
Yeah. And obviously you talked with SEO, keywords, keyword phrases, and the role that those do play. I've been having fun kind of creating some hashtags with that, but really matching that versus the frequently asked questions. If you're going to create a piece of content, do you find that you try to use several keywords or keyword phrases within the article to kind of boost it? Or is there any other strategies around the keywords that you feel is important for the audience to understand and to know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's just a bunch of basics that so many brands miss out. two internal links. So, the content we create for clients always has two or three relevant internal links, but it also includes usually a link out to an authority site, a piece of research on someone else's website. And like there are companies I work with who are saying we don't link out to anybody. Well, Google knows that, and they think less of you because of it. Is the best way to describe it, because an authoritative person or an authoritative brand, didn't grow up in a bubble. None of us became educated in a vacuum. We are all sitting on top of the pillars of information that came before us and the surveys and research that surround us. And so, I like to make the joke of OPP. It's an old reference to an 80s rap song, but OPC, other people's content, is really relevant. So I'm a two-person company. I rank number on the first page for what is marketing, what is thought leadership, what is employee activation, key search terms that are important in my industry, but I don't have the budget to create infographics and surveys. Just this Monday, I did a compilation and published a compilation of a series of 3 or 4 other companies' research on thought leadership. And of course, I gave them all the credit that they deserve for investing in that research. So those are just some simple things that I think can help. The consistency is the biggest tip I try to provide the audiences I speak to. When companies move from infrequent or random publication of content or marketing of any kind to always on, consistent, frequent publication against those themes that I mentioned, those companies see results go up and to the right every single time. Mm-hmm. Those are the companies that are winning market share, they're winning share of voice, they're winning new leads, and they're winning new business because they're making themselves better known in the conversations that are taking place online.
Yeah, that's great. The next thing that I would like to focus on in regards to that conversion side is, what are some measuring tools? What are some key facets that you really pay attention to when it comes to ROI and helping the customer, the clients understand, in that process of creating content, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to ramp up. And oftentimes you'll be putting articles out that may get a like or sometimes a comment or something like this. But when you're creating content, what are you specifically looking for when it comes to that ROI and knowing that you're making some progress in the right areas? And it may or may not get the final phone call for the sales call, but you know that you're on the right path to getting that. And right. Obviously, finish off with what are some really great call to actions that that gets them that phone call or that sale.
Yeah, so I talk, and I mentioned already, reach, engagement, conversion, and retention. And in the book, The Content Formula, there's actually a couple of actual math calculations that I've outlined that define ROI for each one of those key marketing objectives. And okay. I don't refer to awareness, because to me awareness has no value. It's great if everybody knows who Michael Brenner is, but if they don't come and look for me when they have a need that I can solve, then it doesn't matter. It has no value. So I talk about reach, because reach is something I can measure. The number of people, I get nearly 1 million visits on my website. Again, I'm a person of a company of 2 people. With zero marketing budget. We just invest our time in creating content. But the 1 million people that come to my website came completely for free. There are companies that are spending $2, $5, $10 per click in paid search to generate that same traffic, because they don't have the content and they don't rank like I do. So there's a way to measure some people call that equivalent media value. What would it cost me to generate that traffic if I had to pay for it, versus the fact that I get it organically for free? And that's why SEO is so important. Traffic that comes to your website for free from organic search has value. And the value can be very easily measured by looking at the other people that are paying for that same traffic. So that's a simple measure at the top of the funnel, if you will. At the middle of the funnel, there are 2 key metrics we talk about, and one is my favorite, and it's subscribers. So a lot of companies don't even have a newsletter they ask their audiences to opt into for just their content. Every company has a database, and they all like to spam their database with offers and coupons and free trials and all that kind of stuff. But I'm talking about a newsletter of people that subscribe to your content. It's one of the best measures of quality that you can ever come up with. Did somebody invite me into their already overcrowded inbox because the content I create is that good? That's a measure of value, in that we can take those subscribers and we can nurture them to leads and sales. And those subscribers they're not quite leads yet, but they're pretty warm. They're people that you've attracted because of your content. They're now aware of your brand for sure, but they've taken an action, and a pretty significant action. They've given you their email address. And then, with our clients, we work on 7-9 step nurture series of emails that allow us to try to bring them, closer to a relationship that looks more like a customer or a sale. And interestingly, we use more thought leadership and less promotion to get there. It's more webinars and keynotes and infographics and free kinds of giveaways than it is, hey, we're awesome, check us out on our landing page. So subscribers is a measure. Leads is obviously a clear measure that we've been using in B2B marketing forever. If you go to my website, you'll see download this ebook, check out my ultimate guide, click here to register for my free training, watch my latest keynote delivered online. All of those are efforts to try to generate warmer leads more than subscribers. And then my goal is to try to follow up with them to get them to see if they're interested in what we sell. So those are leads that are the demand generation analytics is a pretty mature industry. Obviously, then we can see if those leads mature and convert into sales. The one that most marketers forget is retention. So reach, engage, convert, and retain. Retention is kind of it's like the lost, abandoned child of marketing objectives. And there's all kinds of data that shows that it's easier to keep a customer than to go find a new one, and it increase your retention, and you can increase your ROI by more than any other marketing approach. But you can actually use content to measure the difference. And so what we do for some of our clients is we look at customers that are subscribed to their newsletter and what they spend versus customers that are not subscribed to their newsletter and what they spend. And what we've seen on average is a 4x increase in customers that are engaging with their content through subscriptions. It's very easy to take a customer list and a newsletter database and cross-match and say, okay, what do these folks spend versus the customer list that aren't on the newsletter database, and what do they spend? The average is $4 more, 4 times more. It's insane to think about how a simple approach of generating newsletter subscriptions and creating content can generate 4 times more revenue than not. And so it's a pretty simple path to return on investment.
Sure. Ultimately, having those retention clients become kind of white knights to the extent where they refer. There's even a 5th step.
It's absolutely true. And referrals is actually one of the key case studies that I have on my website. I worked with a local nonprofit who lives on referrals. They don't do any marketing, and we were able to increase their referrals by 10x. And I was on their board, and I gave them all my advice for free, and was really, really happy to see the success that they were able to generate just by tapping into the power of referrals through storytelling.
Yeah, and there's often, I think a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs have said that, oh, I'm fine with, I get referrals all the time and that's my business. And I'm like, well, great. Do you have a referral program? Or, that you want to encourage them to be present online and
That's right.
go beyond that. And some people just don't want to grow that much, but other people are interested in that. So I think that's relevant. You have mentioned a couple different times in my research the empathy side of the sales process and the content. And I wanted to touch on that versus like a pain, because oftentimes when you're getting into a sales conversation and diving down deeper into the client and what they really need and want, and the pain oftentimes may or may not have anything to do with the product, but sometimes it does. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about the difference between, say, an empathy-focused content versus kind of talking about their pain.
Well, I mean, I think having an empathy-based approach, for example, versus just like, pain points is a lot of the term that a lot of companies use. We need to focus on the pain points. Another term I love to hear is use cases. And what I would say is if you're taking an empathetic-based approach towards creating content, or really towards your business overall, you would understand the pains and the problems and the challenges, but you'd also understand so much more. You'd understand, the general concerns, the general path, the general situation, environment of the folks that you are trying to engage with and create new relationships with. In my storytelling course, I talk about marinating in the pain. And what I mean by that is it's every storytelling formula that has ever existed. Joseph Campbell, the Pixar Cinderella storytelling formulas, which I train people on, all spend 80% of their time. Any good story that you know, any great movie you've ever watched spends 80, 90, even 95% of the time of the movie, story, or show on the audience's pain. And that's why I say marinate in it, because most companies like to say, I know you have this pain point, but let me get to the solution, right? We jump right to the most boring movie ever would be one that's 95% resolution, right? No, most movies are 95% journey from a situation that we can relate to that stinks, that feels bad, to one that's beautiful. But the beautiful part doesn't happen until the very end. Um, so, but an empathetic approach really understands the journey,
Yeah.
not so much the pain. Marinating in the pain, it just shows that you understand it. And so that's the difference. I think, companies that try too hard to just focus on pain are doing so inauthentically. They're doing it opportunistically as a way to.
Mm.
It's like I'm going to talk about your pain because I secretly just want to really talk about my solution. It's like I'm going to say, "How are you?" Even though I really don't care, I just want to tell you how I'm doing. It's inauthentic, and I think it shows through with the people and the companies that take that approach.
Sure. Okay, awesome. The last point that I really want to touch on is that leadership side. There's a lot of people out there that are been training leaders, so you're a leader of leaders, and I'm sure you kind of filtrate that through the sales process, the content marketing. Just talk a little bit about leadership and where you think, is it the innovation side? Is it the forward thinking? Like what visionary, like what are you seeing leadership wise that is really important for today and selling and converting and content and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so and again, not promoting what I've done, but I wrote a book called Mean People Suck because I was trying to answer that very question for a long time. And the impetus of the book was I was having a conversation with somebody, and she said, as a senior executive, you seem to have pretty various roles in your career. And it took me a second because I never considered myself an executive or, thank you for saying I'm a leader of leaders. I don't think of myself as a leader. But I do believe in the mission I have to serve people. And I'm a big fan of servant leadership. This conversation a couple of years ago led me to think like, well, how many roles have I really had? And I look back and I talk about this in the book. I've had 53 different roles, and I haven't been at 53 different companies, but I've had 53 different jobs, and going back all the way to the time my first job at 12 years old as a paperboy. But the point was, there were times when I felt very successful and very happy, and times when I was less successful and very unhappy, and there were some times in between where I was one or the other. But the difference for when I was unhappy versus happy, successful and performing high, and not as successful and performing not as well, was the leadership culture that existed at the time, whether it was the person or the company. And what I found was that companies or leaders that take an empathetic based approach were not only allowing me to be more successful, they were more successful. And the companies I worked with, the departments I worked in, the programs we worked on as teams were way more successful than in any of those instances where the leader was more ego driven, was micromanaging, was upward managing, as we love to call it. Those situations were much less desirable and way less effective. And so in the book Mean People Suck, I wasn't sure am I writing a leadership book? It wasn't really a leadership book. It wasn't a book about innovation. What I found was the real difference was it's a mindset. We're hearing a lot about empathy these days. The companies that saw the biggest lift in brand perception during the sort of pandemic that we're living through were the ones that put out messages that they care more about their employees and their safety. And the companies that took an opportunistic approach have a much lower opinion and are going to struggle to sell. Empathy wins, and especially when it's coming from companies and leaders that sort of believe in that. And so when I talk about leadership, very simple question I tell everyone I know to ask whenever they're interviewing for a new job is, do you support the new ideas of the people on your team? I think it's a great litmus test for the companies and the people we might go work for. When I talk to clients, I'm looking for clients that don't want to tell me what to do, but are going to be open to me presenting to them what my ideas are. Like, you're hiring people for their ideas, not so that you can tell them what to do. Especially in this day and age, we live in an information economy. And so that's really my advice for everyone out there is, think about surrounding yourself with people that are interested in what you know, believe that you have something unique to bring to the table in the conversation, and avoid mean people who suck that just want to tell you what to do because they think they know it all.
Sure. Because even in my own journey of raising four daughters and seeing a few of them really as they have a certain power, certain energy, certain gifts and talents. And I think being able to let others shine in their own genius and allowing that, the empathy side of it is one of those things where if you ask somebody to do something, but they don't perform or they don't step up, and then you feel like, okay, well, do I need to show them how? That, I think that's just in the choice of who you have working with you in
Mm-hmm.
the work environment, but in a family environment, it's another thing. But you can't fire your family, so.
That's right. No, but it's a great example, and I have four kids as well, and I always tell people the biggest surprise I think learned in that journey is really how different individual personalities can be, and like, especially when you have a little baby, even at that like newborn stage, the personalities really are so different, and so if you're a parent and you say, I want my kid to go to grad school and become a doctor, well, that's just not the right path, and that's what I think you're talking about is we all want our kids to thrive, but we have to allow them to thrive in their own way, and I think that's the lesson for leadership that I tried to bestow in the book.
Yes, excellent. Well, thank you, Michael. This has been a true joy, and I really appreciate your time and all your input. Is there any upcoming things that you've got going on? Obviously, we'll give some links out for some of the things that you've mentioned. But really, like, is there anything that you would like to offer or let people know about in general for you and give
No,
us?
I'm not trying. Like I said, I wasn't trying to promote my books, but if you want to check them out, you can go to marketinginsidergroup.com and, learn all about me and the two books that I wrote. And if there's anything I can do to help anyone, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laura.
Okay.